Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the Chicago Architecture Biennial this evening. We are thrilled to be presenting a screening of Summer Flowers. Informed by the colonial histories of their home country of South Africa, Wolff Architects addresses social inequities and the erasure of an Indigenous landscapes and narratives. The film Summer Flowers is an extension of Wolff Architects' project for the third edition of the Chicago Architecture Biennial and Other Such Stories, looking at the life of South African writer, activist, and gardener Bessie Head. Following the screening, please join us for a pre-recorded conversation moderated by writer and artist Julie Nandi, music and composer Cara Stacy, documentarian and editor Khalid Seamus. We'll discuss the process and research of Summer Flowers with Wolff Architects co-founder, film director, and 2019 Chicago Architecture Biennial contributor, Ilse Wolff.
Here we go.
Wretched is a man who's born in every way. He will live on promises till his dying day. Freedom from life is the only reward for me. That's why I say mountainside, that's where my soul shall bide. No marking for my grave when I passed on. Deep in my slumberland, far from the sins of man, no heartache will I know when I've passed on.
administration, which is the area in which I eventually settled, had applied for teachers in South Africa. I wanted to build up my life again, so I applied for the job as a primary school teacher, and I was given the job. A little complication arose out of that, because when I applied for a passport, it was refused, and I left on an exit permit. So it was, the main motivation was to get away from a marriage that didn't work out. The first three novels of a writer's life can draw very deeply on a writer's living experience. So when people ask me, when did you start writing? You would say, also, when did you start living your books? When did you start living your books? So I've often had to explain that I would live a book for 3 years and then type it out in 6 months, but then I have gained so much control over my living experience. have so much more confidence now because of the historical research I have done. I feel so much more confident about putting pieces together, because I not only wrote my own books, I went out and I worked together with people and collected oral data from them, so that thought patterns in the people are very ancient ones. History can be mats and cups and things people make for themselves, but so many overtones of, my grandfather did it this way, this is our traditional way of life, but not something that hurts, something that's just there, it's just there for you. So all these things I had absorbed into my own writing. I'm not dependent on an environment, but at the same time, it's there for me like a prop to lean on. My first novel, When Rainclouds Gather, was published in 1968. It's full of the preoccupations of a South African refugee. The best way I can explain it is in the words of an industrial millionaire who used his money to conquer the interior of southern Africa. His main area of conquest was, and he waged 2 wars against the people, was Zimbabwe, which formerly had his name, Rhodesia. When he waged the last war of conquest, in 1896, he said, "I have taken everything from them but the air." The problem is more acute in South Africa. You look across the land as a black person and you feel choked. You feel that even the air has been taken because so many vast areas have been reserved for white occupation only. There's nothing there for black people. I would hope, because I have worked that way, I have faced questions of, if you have read Maru, you would know it probes racialism almost to root sources, and it is not limited to white people. It is something that is inside mankind that makes them cruel to, if they can get their fellow man and make their fellow man inferior. Racial hatreds and prejudices are not restricted to the white race. They're equal. Black people are equally capable of racialism. It's a universal thing.
Hello.
Hey, Julie. Hi, Sally.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
Cara.
Hello, Ilsa. Hello, Cara. Hello, Julie. I'm so excited to be speaking to all of you because, I mean, I obviously saw the film when it was first dropped. And then I watched it again building up to this conversation. And I was quite I was being quite romantic, but also it feels so romantic, and it feels like such a necessary romance when thinking about Bessie. So I felt quite like overwhelmed with feelings of just like, I'm so happy that this is happening, and it's so fitting that it's just like this bouquet really of thoughts and emotions and sounds and scapes, and but at the same time in almost conversation with this powerhouse's writing and thinking style, not bogged down by this ever relentless kind of ask for coherence. Like, this is how this is how you tell this story. This is how you get from thought A to thought B.
Yeah.
There's something amazing that Bessie says when she was talking about the thought patterns in the people, right? And what this display felt like was the symphony of thought patterns. And so I'm quite interested to hear, and I know that I said who wants to hear about, like, so when did this all start? But really, I do want to know, like, what was the process of kind of, getting this together?
Okay. Thank you for that. I mean, there's a lot of, it is a homage. It is a beautiful bouquet that I wanted to, give to this incredible mind. I mean, she was such an incredible writer. I mean, she had all these thoughts and she had all these experiences that she put down in these books. Question of Power being, for me, the one that really, struck out in this body of work that she produced. But the project came out of an obsession, as all projects do. You know, I found out that Bessie Head's house was a national heritage site in Botswana, Sorowe, where she lived, and I just could not leave that thought. Like, this house, I had to go and visit it first of all, and the fact that this house of this writer is a heritage site. Heritage meaning, it's important. It's a kind of it signifies a legacy. It signifies a place where all this work came out of. But then, you know, as this obsession grew, as they all do, I realized, that this is not just like, it's just not a house. I mean, there's a whole story behind it. In terms of, there was this garden, that she worked her own personal garden at the house, but there was also this garden that she co-produced with others. In this Boiteko um, volunteer group that existed in the 1960s. And then this idea of making this garden and constructing this house, which came out of the proceeds of her first novel, in the midst of when South Africa was going through the most brutal forced removals. People's houses were being completely demolished uh, you know, because of the apartheid state's forced removals. It was horrible what was going on in South Africa. To contrast that with this woman and this group of people making this garden in this house, it became these two thoughts that I just needed to construct in, all these things that came out of Summer Flowers. So that's where it came from. That's kind of the obsession, and we just moved it along.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I almost want to jump straight into the music then, right? Because I don't think I had ever heard Miriam Makeba and seen her, because after that, after seeing this film, I was like, well, obviously I have to find out what's going on. And so I'm like frantically looking for like, what am I listening to? And I saw this performance in Sweden, right? And I was like, Harry Belafonte, you lucky fuck. But I was also just like, this is, I don't think I've ever seen this. I don't think I've ever seen Miriam like this. And so there was, there's like this association between that song, that entry, and precisely what you're saying, this contrast, right? Because even in that performance, there's this contrast that's happening, that you are seeing this beautiful thing, but it makes you aware of this other this other world, this other thing that's going on, this backdrop against which you're getting to read this beauty and getting to engage this kind of complexity.
Where she wouldn't be allowed to flex like that.
Right. Right. And I was just like, what's going on? So there's like Bessie who's flexing, right? Who's flexing in making and making beauty, just being and enjoying the beauty and the idea of comfort and home, right? And then you've got the song. That song, who pulled that trigger? Can I just ask?
Bessie did.
Yeah?
She was obsessed with that song. She was
Bessie.
obsessed with that song. There's a line from one of her letters that she wrote. She said she's playing the song over and over and over, and she wrote about Miriam Makeba. And I had to bring it in because number one, that song, she said she played it to the groove, but it also was interesting about like her funeral, her passing. It was very important for the film to start with, the funeral. That's one of the reasons why we got that track. But I sent Kara a playlist, right? There was a playlist. It took a long time to get to that particular track. It took about a year and a half through the process, and I realized this is it. I mean, it's a continuous project, it's not complete, but also Khali to put it right in the beginning, also, right?
Yeah, I don't know how we came to that. But it happened.
Definitely. It happened.
I mean, the pacing of the film is it feels very familiar. I'm from the rural areas. I'm from a very remote part of the Eastern Cape, and so it feels very familiar. This idea of going home, right? And also seeing a house that this powerful woman has put so much attention and thought and heart into, right? And it's so direct. You know what I mean? So I'd like to know, how Khalid, you came onto the project. Kara, how you came at what point did you guys jump in?
I came in when Ilza was making an installation, right? So usually I start with music when I'm editing. I'm like, okay, what are we working with? What's the score? What's the soundscape? And who's the composer, right? And then, but there wasn't any. With the installation, it was like no sound. So then we started cutting it like that. So just images moving over 20 minutes.
23 minutes around like that.
And this was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago. And so that was nice, actually quite a freeing process for me not to be bound by sound, and allowing the image to play out as long as it needs. I mean, the whole process was a process of exploring really the material from Heinrich, trying a few different things out. We didn't have that opening movement in the early cut. So the idea was, right, how to visualize this being played in an installation space where you kind of move around and you can just come in at any time and watch this piece, right, and be in her house and leave and go and see the rest of the exhibition. and that was it. I
Yeah.
think, you know,
Yeah.
and there was talk in between, like at some point, how to make it into a film. But then Cara got hold of it.
Yes.
And then it
Then
came
Cara
back.
got her hands on
Yeah.
it.
So then,
Yeah.
yeah, that was interesting. Really,
Yeah.
quite exciting, interesting for me to see it now with
Yeah.
another voice on it.
Yes.
And Cara, what was that voice? Like, tell me more about that. Like, that sounds hectic.
It was, I guess, I can kind of understand what Khaled is saying, because for me it was, I'm not used to just having the visuals to play around with and experiment in that way. It was kind of, it's not a blank canvas, but it's really nice to have at that time, that earlier edit, not have any really focused narrative for it, but actually just it felt much more sensory to me at that point, which was great, because I think Ilse sent me the long recording, the interview. So it was actually my first time hearing Bessie Head's voice as well, having like, you know, read her work and studied her in high school, and, you know, very like iconic name and body of work, to actually just sit with this recording of her voice for the first part of my process for quite a long time, and listen to, you know, just the sonority of her voice, which is very, very particular. But then also have these images that really gave a sense of place, whether it was in the building or outside of the building as well. So, and that kind of thing really interests me in terms of sound and music anyway, was like evoking the feeling of being in those spaces, or around those spaces. So yeah, and then also just thinking about her voice and thinking about the particular things that she says in that interview. So emotive, really, really powerful. So, and I think at some point, I think it's kind of towards the end, she talks about just making things as beautiful as she can, making work that is as beautiful as she can. And that really, I don't know, really struck me. So I had the beautiful job of just basically making beautiful stuff, making things that I could make as beautiful as possible, that spoke to those images and those spaces, and the feeling of what it would have been like to be in all of those places. So that was kind of how I directed the music making from my side.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, to say that it was sensory is correct. Like, it feels like there was like this constant touching on the sense. Just when you kind of like, oh, okay, here I'm in Bessie's kitchen, right? And then something is blossoming in the corner, right? And off you go, right? I'm really excited about because you were saying that there wasn't quite certainty that it would become a film. So I'm really excited about hearing what motivated that to then become a film, because a lot of the time, even the notion of a film, you know, certain things start to fall away. You know, like it becomes a little bit difficult to figure out, okay, so how am I going to, you know, say this without overstating it, or how do I put this in without instructing, or how do I, you know, so how did you make that decision to transition this installation into a film?
Look, I mean, the material was there, you know.
Obsession. Maintained. It's
Maintained.
I would, I mean, well, we should also talk about Plaatje, and
Absolutely.
then that moment.
And
I think the sensory thing is interesting, because the only thing that's missing, which isn't missing actually, is almost you can smell the food, you can smell the flowers, right, in the space. And maybe that's what, you know, when you do a screening in the space, you have a pot of, you know, some biryani, and you have flowers. I don't know. There's kind of room for that sensory experience to grow, to build, or
I mean, I'm also thinking about the knowledge production and kind of an all sensory experience, right? It's not just this thing about, you know, we're going to now maybe, I don't know. So for me, the senses and learning through the senses is so important.
Yeah.
And that's what this project also taught me, you know, that nothing is linear. It's not like now we're making a film, now we're making
Right.
installations,
Right.
we're documenting.
Right.
I wanted it to be like an all-encompassing experience, you know. So the film is one fragment of it.
Yeah.
The film is one process, and you know, one offering. And I think Bessie's work was also quite like that. You know, she worked primarily through literature. But then you discover she was also this incredible gardener. She was also this incredible friend. She was, you know, a mom. We all do different things.
Right,
you know?
right.
So
Like writing is one means of
Exactly.
articulation, but there were many ways in which she was.
Exactly, and also
I'm sure if you gave her a camera,
Yeah.
songs, she'd
Rip it. She would.
she was very obsessive. You know, she was obsessed about things. You know, she was obsessed about, you know, concerning land. You know, and she was obsessed about Plaatje. She was obsessed about Robert Sobukwe. You know, she became really fascinated with these figures. You know, for good reason. And I think that there is this, you know, there's a sense of, I really think knowledge shouldn't be kind of like just in these discrete disciplines. You know, we are architects. You know, we present ourselves as architects in the world, but now we're making films. You know, we've got this whole other ecosystem that we're part of. You know,
and even that, really even important. The film is not the, you know, kind of the expected film form. Anyway,
right.
But it's fine, because when you're in it, once you're in, you're in. You're there and you're following. It doesn't have to be this linear expression. I mean, when we cut the installation, it ended with the funeral.
Yes. Yes.
And then when the sound was there, after Cara kind of played with it, then you also felt things needed to be changed, needed restructuring. So so the linearity of the film as we know it is not in this, but doesn't mean it's not.
I was very uncomfortable with the ending of it for a long time, but I didn't know why. I didn't know why until I saw another film about Diop in Senegal and his life, you know, and he started with a funeral, started with his life, and I thought, you know, that's a nice way not to end it, because I mean, somebody's life is an opening for somebody else. It's not how you end it, you know. But it's also like I needed to learn about film more, you know. So I'm not a filmmaker. So it took about a year from that process to this process, you know, a year and a half to finish something, you know, because it's not. You're not kind of trained in that format, but you want to tell stories.
I mean, I think that if there's, I was speaking to Khalid just earlier about, you know, learning and dabbling and figuring out what film can be. And one of the things that I've been thinking about, and something that was, I think may have been one of those kind of intangible things about this film, was that, you know, when we look at iconic characters in our history, right, as much as we might, you know, animate their timeline, we don't really animate them, right? Like they're quite flat and stiff, and you can't really engage with these ideas or these icons in a human way, right? And it's things like finding out that your favorite author is an avid gardener, right? You know, and things like finding out that they made their house, like they're particular about these things, and not just you know, sitting behind a desk somewhere, just like, you know, in this, you know, swirl of pain and anguish, which is, I think, a lot of what characterizes a lot of the icons that, you know, that we herald. And so here you're just seeing bounty, you know, like this different kind of bounty that's exciting, but that also excites you and validates you as a maker and a creator, when it comes to the ways in which you kind of like go from one thing to the other, and you know, you express and think and, you know, experiment with all these different kind of forms, you know, and that made me feel safe. You know what I mean? I don't know whether that makes sense, but that made me feel safe. When you're making, or when you're listening, right? When you're listening, Cara, for when you're listening back at this footage, I suppose, like, I'm wondering how, do you even begin? Even with you, Khalid, like when you're listening back and when you're looking and when you're seeing this installation, sometimes it's quite easy to just kind of get not staggered, but you're kind of like, I don't want to touch anything. I don't want to touch anything. And maybe that's just me and being precious, but how do you enter, especially in collaborative work? Because I think that that's the beauty of this project as well, is that you can feel like the sense of collaboration, right? So how do you enter? It's kind of like double dutch. How do you jump? Yeah.
How do you then stay there?
Yeah.
Not trip over.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was very important to invite people in, as I've also been invited into this project. I mean, a lot of this work couldn't have been possible without the trust, from the Bessie Head Heritage Trust, a group of people that are really custodians of this house, number one, and her legacy, and making sure that people are caring of Bessie Head today, because she was she was an icon, but she was also a very complex person. She was complicated. Bessie was complicated, and the thing is, one needs to tell the stories in complicated ways. Honor her, she fought with a lot of people. If you look at her letters, she was fighting with her agents in London. She was fighting with people. She was in love with people. She was this really complex person and complex creator. And so I needed people that would understand the complexity, would be in care of it, of this project. It's not just kind of flat hagiography or flat representation of this person. It's very multidimensional, So there are a lot of people that are part of this project, that's not sitting around today talking, that it's they needed to be big because Bessie Head's big, but it also needed to be accessible,
right?
So how do we make a publication that is just 9 pages, of letters and pressed flowers, and and in this film, 23 minutes. It's and then sort of offer it as an invitation. Kara, here's the visuals. Add music. Here's the material. Let's do something. So it needed to be kind of an invitation like that.
The pressing flowers is something I really want to know a little bit more about. And you spoke earlier about Salt Plaatje. Tell me a little bit more about that, because I don't, when you're like, oh, okay, Bessie Head was that's Salt Plaatje, interesting. But it's like, what does that mean, or how did that then influence the project, and how did that influence you in approaching?
I saw a film that was made by Lance Geber about Salt Plaatje. It's a fictional representation of Salt Plaatje. Lerato Maduna found it for me, and we were watching it together, and there was a scene where the actor playing Salt Plaatje, Ernest Global, where he picks up a flower, and the little boy asks him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm keeping a record of everything that I see," And then he takes this flower that he pressed and he puts it in a notebook, which I like to believe that is the notes he was taking from native life. Right? So that scene, whether it was real or completely imagined by the filmmaker, I don't really care. But it really is a beautiful way of telling the story of keeping a record, of the land, of what people were doing. Is you can write, you can take photographs, you can, record oral histories, but there's another way of doing it. You're just literally taking things off the land, putting it in a book, and that's the record. And I thought it was, we got to perform that. We've got to perform that now. So the way the research was constructed is that we went to Bessie's house, and we took whatever remnants there were left of her garden, we pressed that. The graveside, we pressed some plant material. We went to District 6 and took some material from a house, from a place close to where she lived in District 6. So it was a kind of just keeping record of all these places, you know, where she may have been, but also then District 6, you know,
Yeah.
still a monument to erasure.
When you did that, were you filming at the same time? Or
Yeah.
you went back? So you're also capturing
As you
the
went.
image,
Yeah,
just for record.
Yeah, exactly. So those moments in the film where we're going into the microwave,
Yes.
and then there's a flower there, that is a garden in District 6, for instance, you know.
Right, the flower.
Exactly. So it's like, how do we go out of the house into the real space? It's kind of this conversational record.
What was it when it was filmed?
Yeah.
Were you thinking about making the film with that material? Or just to do something for the installation to capture the space?
Yeah. I mean, that was a way to keep record. You know?
Yeah.
So,
Okay, that's amazing.
the installation in Chicago was strange because I really wanted to use the pressed flower clippings that we gathered here and take it to Chicago, but the laws of
I don't think it would be easy to travel with fresh flowers. I don't know why.
It's
I
funny.
feel like it would be
The easiest thing to do.
but
No.
it's like no, custom.
exactly. So
Right.
the wonderful curators at Chicago actually went out and pressed flowers for
Oh, that's
installation as
great.
well. You know, so they had their own system there. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking a little bit about just the word fugitivity, right? You know, especially when you know, as we're kind of like moving through what it feels like. So I think it's around the time Bessie is speaking about, you know, you live a book. She lives a book for 3 years and then writes for 6 months, kind of vibe, right? And soon after that, you know, there's mention of District 6 and forced removals, and you know, just this idea of migrating from one place, even in one's own consciousness, to another, right? And moving from one form to the other. I mean, it kind of felt like it kept swinging back around, and not even. I mean, it's strange because it's when I think of the word fugitive, I start thinking about running, but it doesn't feel like running, you know. It feels like leaving. Right? You know, it feels like, okay, well, this is not what I thought, even where I do understand like the urgency, right? But it does feel like this move, and this almost also this restraint and this patience. I mean, just thinking about living a story for 3 years, you know, and then almost like just purging it into this different form. Do you feel like you had, or will you have that kind of relationship with Bessie and this process, this thought process, and this kind of living with Bessie the way that you have?
Yeah, I think it's very generative. You know, it's a methodology that was completely invented, you know, because of this research process. But I mean, yeah, I think definitely, you know, it needed to be these different things. You know, it needed to be, but this idea of fugitive is interesting. What you're saying, it's different from refugee. Right? Right. It's different, like from this thing of like a victim. You know, it's like you're going purpose, intention, and purpose around that. And I think if one take filmmaking, music, architecture, literature, take these disciplines seriously, one needs to go into kind of a fugitive force somehow, because disciplines become so, you know,
to break out of them.
Right. Exactly.
Once you're an architect, you're kind of stuck in a way. In the building, you're stuck in.
Exactly.
The building you've drawn around yourself. So to break is quite a thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely necessary. And I think Bessie sort of gives you that permission. And the work does that, you know. So it's very transformative.
I mean, without seeming like or making it seem like a hot topic, have you had that experience of kind of like being a fugitive within your own discipline as well, like rushing from one place to the next?
Myself.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, but we're still in the same space. I'm still sitting at the edit suite.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of trapped by the space, which is why I'm doing other things, but working on an installation or working on a featured doc or working on a short thing, it takes the same approach. So it doesn't really break. It's nice to, even within the one film, there's lots of things to do, right? Because you are trying to be creative, you're also very technocratic about it, and you're kind of obsessive about organizing stuff, right? Stuff no one sees. So there's the OCD part of it, and then there's the creative part. So there is within it, there's, for me anyway, there's different things to do all the time.
Right.
So it doesn't get static. But at the same time, I'm static. I'm just sitting there and just really my fingers.
And your mind.
Yeah, my fingers. So it's like there's a trapping in this kind of, but there's also a freeing.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. How about you?
I mean, I think that, it's interesting to hear you speak about, Bessie as inviting, like you said, the song, Miriam's song is Bessie's song, right? And so there's a sense in which you actually get to escape into, right, this different place, and that you leave. So sometimes it does feel like there are opportunities to run or leave or stomp out that are gratifying, but even though it feels like you're stationary, right, and even though it feels like you're at the same desk you were at yesterday and you're at the same keyboard, right, but there's this different place, this different district of thought that you get to rush to and stay at. And I suppose this is why I was like, do you envisage that kind of experience of this big incubator, incubation part, and then this purging part? Because I suppose that one of the entrapments that I've found myself in is just staying. Just staying wherever. It's oh, it's nice here. And then someone's like, you have to finish this. And just no. There's so much more, and especially with, when it comes to, as South Africans, when it comes to our archive and the way that it's been kind of pressed down and flattened, and you're, in defiance, you almost don't want to leave, you're like, this person deserves way more attention than even I have given them, and just way more nuance than even I have given them. But at the same time, it was you have to go, you have to kind of move on. So it's it's strange. It's strange. It's a strange kind of relationship with history and relationship with the archive.
But it's the relationships we have with the people who now are working with us. Right?
Yes.
So from one project to the next, then that's the kind of exciting fugitivity, right? Who you're working with and what they are thinking, how to bring that vision, or maintain that vision, bring your own vision in, and work with. I mean, Kara's done amazing work, but I've never worked with her.
Right.
And we still haven't really, in a way, right? It's
it's a different setup.
It's here you go, and then there hasn't been that correspondence, which is also a nice way to.
You have worked together. I've got the WhatsApps to approve It's a strange. I mean, it's interesting for me to see that you normally start with the music, and Kara, you normally start with visuals. So it was a completely different. You're starting with the kind of soundscape that and it was a completely otherwise. It was otherwise, man.
It's just otherwise all over.
I think we have to also mention that the material itself didn't arrive with this confidence right behind it.
True.
So here's some amazing material.
Yes.
Make it sing.
Yes.
It was very much because Heinrich filmed it.
Yes.
He's not known to be a camera shooter.
Yeah.
but he's definitely got a good eye, and he can compose, and he can feel a space.
Yes.
And the feeling was, well, here's the material, what can we do?
Exactly.
But it's you look at the very considered movements with the material.
Yeah.
So
the
And
material
I think
is
that's part of, that's also kind of, well, for me, that was kind of the strength of it as well, because that whole way of working and that sense of all the material in its various strengths and weaknesses, that it for me, it put a lot more focus on the collaborative nature of our work together. So it was suddenly like, there was a lot of space, I think, or at least that's how it felt from my side. There's a lot of space for me to do things and for me to get feedback, in terms of what was working and what wasn't. And there's a lot of space anyway, just in terms of the visual footage, and then also in terms of the music as well. I try to respond to that with like creating as much space as possible. But I think that, it's going back to something Khalid was saying about working together at some point before. But it feels like, because of the various parts of the project where we were stepping out of a comfort zone in one way or another, it left a lot of space to do this kind of work, or to kind of push forward and create something new out of it, from my side at least. I can say, because I also picked up a clarinet, which I haven't done in about 20 years, to play some parts for, because suddenly that just felt like that was the right thing for that moment. So, but that openness, I think, in all senses, really, well, I think it still comes through in the project. I think that's one of the strengths for me.
Yeah, I mean, the material wasn't, one method. It was the very beautiful capture of the house behind me. There was Lerato's capturing of the process of picking the flowers. There was Malik's capturing of the conversation in our office. There was, there was different material, and there was also the stuff that it was Lance's work from the archive of Plaatje's film. So it was very bitty in a way, right? But then how do we bring it together to make it like a piece that feels collective? I wanted it to feel collective, because I mean that was the gardening process. That was the garden that she created, like this collective, productive garden of everything, So
I mean, that's I forgot that Malik was, and I just remembered because there's this scene that kind of plays out on the bed, and I just like, I kept going back because it was just so, I don't know, the blanket is so familiar, the scene is so familiar, like everything. It was strange. It was like looking at a photo album. Like, it's one of my favorite things to kind of look at photo albums of my family and just like see the lineage of what you're like looking at, right down to like the teapots, right? But it was so engaging, and it's given me a different kind of confidence. There's this sense of, again, like, and I don't want to say it is a sense, it's a sensation. It's like this subtle sensation that, the beginning, middle, end sensation, right? And it's kind of like, you can feel, just like you were saying about this funeral at the end, you can just feel that that's not what that's supposed to be, even though narratively everything says that that's what's supposed to be, right? And sometimes in projects that are like what you're describing this one to have been, which seems to have been so spacious, right? And that invites, of course, not just the skill set of a collaborator, but the conversation, and the thoughts and the knowledge and the expression, right? There's something that'll help to reaffirm those interruptions, right?
I mean, I'm just thinking now also of Khotso. She was also part of it. Lamola wrote a letter to me that's part of the publication that kind of documents our thought process. So it's definitely about having a conversation, and all these people happen to be friends.
Yes,
because the friendship is really about trusting. You know,
Yeah.
can I trust you with this material, right?
Yeah.
Can I trust you with this work? You know, and let's do it together. You know, and it's about friendship and it's about care. And it's not exact. I mean, all my friends happen to be dope, whatever they do, but but it's also about the conversation.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like, how would you, if you hadn't made this and someone came to you and said, right, we got money to make the film about Bessie Head.
Yeah.
It would be the linear telling, right?
Right.
It would be like where she was born and what happened in her life.
Yeah.
And this is like just, it opens the door much more than, because with a film like that, the assumption is that that's the story now.
Right.
You don't have to go and read the books even.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the story. But now with this,
Yes.
it opens up a door like she opened up the door of the house and we entered the house and you want to now read the work, right?
Right.
Exactly.
It opens up so much and you get so much more, I think. And then when you hear her voice, it lifts you, right? It takes you elsewhere.
Like razor sharp.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
everyone said that, isn't it? It's unexpected how she can sound.
Yeah, it's unexpected how she found, but also it's rare to hear Bessie's voice. I mean, it's unlike Dambuzo. Dambuzo Marashera is everywhere.
Running in his
He's
mouth.
everywhere.
There's
There's visuals, there's voice, there's everything, and it's in the archive at Humboldt University. You can access it. It's there. But Bessie, I haven't found visual video footage of her. You know, it must be somewhere, but I haven't.
Right.
It was really difficult to find a voice. We had to work through the trust. They've got the audio files. It's not just accessible in the archive, you know. So yeah, it's rare material in a way, right?
It felt like real material. It really did. It felt like a secret.
Yeah. But also to hear her voice, I mean, it just took a long time to track it and finally you hear it. It's like, is this what she sounded like?
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
It's like, it was unexpected and it was a surprise. Because you kind of, like from that picture, that George Hallett picture, where you kind of expect her to be like this badass.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Big voice, and then she has this very gentle voice, you know, very gentle.
Yeah, when she was talking about teaching young children, I was like, sounds like it. Sounds like a teacher where you'd be like, teacher, please. You know, like as a young person, you would completely surrender to that voice.
It does make you stop.
And listen and lean in.
Lean in, basically.
Can I jump in here and say something about her voice? Just what you were saying now about her being razor sharp, like, because I edited out, you know, the audio track needed a little bit of fixing. It was quite unclear at first. So I spent so much time just listening again and again to her words. But I really like that contrast of, you know, musically, sonically, she has a really sweet sounding voice, quite high, quite melodious kind of voice. And that contrasted with like precision thoughts and articulation that is intimidating to listen to, but also really inspiring to just hear someone like absolutely no messing around, beating around the bush, completely concise, completely intellectually, like, I don't know, just completely on it with every single thing, every kind of aspect, whether she was talking about broader societal things or personal things or artistic, you know, it was like so sharp. And this masked by this quite sweet sounding voice, which was just engaging me a lot because of just how it sounded, and how that matched with other sonic things that I was kind of playing around with in the music. But yeah, it's so intimidating and totally inspiring at the same time.
But that's the same experience I had when we arrived at our house, because I've never experienced a house where you just go into the kitchen. That you come in,
go around the back.
Exactly. And that was, I thought, you know, as an architect, she was extremely direct, because that's basically where people want to be.
Right.
The kitchen.
Right.
And so why not just make it the first room that you come in?
Yeah.
You know? So it's a very direct spatial practice. You know? And it goes with what you're saying, you know. Her thoughts were so precise, you know, and so clear. The clarity in that. You know?
And I mean, it's so strange because when people speak about Bessie's writing, right? Even when I was younger and I was like trying to be cool, so I was only reading hardcore stuff. Like I was just walking around grade 11 with hardcore text under my arm. Yeah. But there was a time where I was reading Bessie Head and I was reading Alice Walker at the same time. And I was like too young to really, wrap my mind around it. And a lot of people who were older and friends of mine in uni were speaking about, oh, it's so dense and complicated, and it takes, but it's again, it's what she says, or what is in the audio when she speaks about like the thought patterns of our people, right? And that precision is still there. It's I don't know. I don't want to. It's almost, it's like a lot of information that's suspended in like one thing. It's precision, but there's a lot to. It feels like there's a lot to get through, and then you get to the other end, and you're like, that's clear. You know what I mean? You get to the other end, and you're like, clear. I hear you, and sometimes you kind of have to learn a rhythm, right? Like you kind of have to almost learn a dialect, and then after about Submit. You have to give in,
easy with it.
Yeah, you're in the kitchen. You're here now. Well, thank you. I mean, I think if there's anything else that you guys want to throw in the ring.
Well, I want to know what's happening. I guess it's another conversation, but what's the plan for it? Is there a plan for it?
So that house, we must mention that it was Mosadi Nyama's house.
Yes.
Mosadi is a relative of Bessie Head who lived there, and she and the trust have come to a conversation around changing it into a museum or kind of a space, not a museum, it's not the right word, but like a reflective space for the work of Bessie Head, and to revive, most importantly, the garden again.
Right.
So that conversation is happening as we speak. So I get regular calls from Tom Holzinger, who gives me updates. He's Tom in Question of Power.
Oh,
yeah.
Wild. That must have been wild for you to be speaking to Tom.
And so Tom keeps us abreast of what's happening, and it's an unfolding project.
Okay. And I mean, with the film, like where does it live? Where is it going? What do we?
Yeah, I mean, it lives on the net.
Okay.
It lives there. I mean, we've just it's also the Kama Museum, Kama Third Memorial Museum. They've also got a copy. People can go there. You can go to this museum and go through all the letters that Bessie wrote.
Where's that?
In Sirowe. In the village where the house is. So the Kama Third Memorial Museum is an incredible space as well. To visit, and we didn't have enough time to go through all the stuff at that. But they've got the footage, and in fact, the film includes the recreation of Bessie's writing space at the museum.
Nice.
Yeah, so Tom and others recreated where Bessie would have worked with a typewriter. That scene with the typewriter. That's the Kama Museum.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's an interesting conversation with the house where she actually lived, which is now Mama's house, which is currently being, changed over to the trust, and the museum where it's basically this incredible archive of her work. Yeah, so that's where that is at. And I mean, I just know the garden actually still exists. Parts of the communal garden still exist. Poiteko Garden, and that's also in the film. So there's it's more of like a commercial nursery as well. So you can buy plants there. But these spaces exist, they're there. So the film is just saying, go and see, have a look, and go for yourself. So the film is a kind of a conversation around that.
And an invitation, and that's amazing. Like it sounds like it's been an invitation every step of the way. And we thank you for that invitation. Thank you guys for your generous work. Thank you to everyone who's on the team, Lerato, Malik, Heinrich, who else did you?
Megan
Hotzo,
Becky.
Thank you to the trust. Thank you to everyone that has made this And Chicago.
Chicago.
Chicago. Thank you, Shai-san. Thank you for everything. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Cara.
Thanks
Thanks for being so amazing.
Thanks, guys. Sorry, I'm not there.
Well,
We're having tea with
next
you.
time. Next time.